Hey everyone, welcome. I'm James with Kinetic Data. You're watching our orientation series, and in this video, we're going to be diving into the actual world of building apps on Kinetic. In the last few videos, we covered the problems that we set out to solve with our digital experience platform, as well as some of the key principles behind our architecture like backend as a service, multi-tenancy, and our use of open technologies. At Kinetic, we publish some starter apps which can include pre-configured portals and forms and workflows, but in this series, we're starting from scratch. And so I'm going to show you how to build up an app from Hello World. So what you're seeing on the screen here is our platform console. I'm logged in, and the first thing I want to point out to you is the URL here. So we're using our hosted platform called kinops.io. And right now I'm in a tenant called Hello World. So to distinguish between tenants, we use a subdomain. And so as I'm logged in here, again, when you get your environment, you'll have a different subdomain for your specific playground environment. And then where I'm landing here is on what's called the space dashboard. And so a space for us is equivalent to a tenant. Think about the global kind of context for everything that you're going to build within your tenant is the space. So this is where you do things like set up new users. Might be where you set up new teams or groups within Kinetic. That's stuff that's done at the space level. And so that's kind of a key concept. Think of the space as like the root level within your environment. And then everything that you build out will become what we call CAPs or Kinetic apps within that environment. So the first thing that we want to do is create a new CAP. So in the space here, I'm going to go to CAPs and click New CAP. And I'll call this Test CAP 1. So we gave our CAP a name. And then we also want to introduce this concept of a slug. A slug is a URL-friendly unique identifier. So every CAP that you create will get its own slug. And I'll show you how this connects to our API in just a little bit. So again, first step, we're creating this CAP. Think about the CAP as a folder, and that folder is going to be where you build out all of your forms and the associated workflows. These CAPs or folders, structures, you can think of them as separate applications. So maybe you have an HR app that you're building or a one-off app that's solving a specific problem. So now that I created my first CAP, in the drop-down list up here, I can see that new test CAP 1 has appeared. And I navigate into that, and now I'm in the context of this CAP. So it's important when you're building that you understand what context you're in. If I'm at the space, I'm not going to see my list of forms and workflows, but when I go into my CAP, then I will. And so the most kind of common thing here that you'll do is start building forms. And so forms, as we talked about in earlier videos, this is where we capture data from end users, typically to initiate a process. Think something like request a new iPad, or I need to approve something, or participate in the process. So I'm in my test CAP 1. I'm now going to create a new form. I'm going to call this test form 1. Just like with the CAPs, each form gets a unique identifier. And there's some other properties that we'll cover in a deep dive video on forms later. So we create our form, and now I can go into the builder here. This is our low-code form builder. And now I'm going to just start, adding a couple of elements. So I usually do a drop-down list and call it favorite color. And favorite color might be red, blue, and green. And if I hit save here, now I've successfully created a form that's got some fields on it. And what I want to do is now switch gears and show you what this looks like from an end user perspective in what we call our front end code. So if I click this preview button in my form builder, it's going to open up a new tab. And this is what an end user might see. So I see my test form 1, and I can choose my favorite color and then go ahead and submit one. So now I've created a CAP, I've created a form, and then I've created what we call a submission or a record inside of this form. And so those records are stored within the Kinetic platform. And eventually, in a later series of this videos, we'll start hooking up workflows to these forms. I'm going to switch back now to the platform console where we do our building. So here's our form builder. I'm going to go back one level. And I'm still in the context of this test CAP 1 inside of test form 1. And if I click on submissions, I now see that I have a record that's been submitted here. And I can see if I click into it, the favorite color is red. From here, as an administrator of this form, I can edit this data right from within the console here. So I'm going to now go back to the end user experience, kind of up to the top. This is what we call our starter base application. And so this is a React application. Again, we covered that on previous videos. This React application is meant to be extended, but this is a starter that you can use as a placeholder. And so when I log in for the first time to this end user experience, I can see the caps that have been created. I can click into that cap. I can see then the forms that have been created and click into that form. And then it'll show me a list of submissions, records that are created inside of that form, and I can create a new one. What I want to do next is now show you the same thing that I just walked through in the user interface, but from the API's context. So I'm going to open up a new tab here. And I'm going to just use, in my case, helloworld.kinops.io. So that's the URL to my environment. And then say /app API v1 /space. And so our API, again, the same thing that our front end is calling, is going to call these APIs here. And so I've got the space, and then I can say /caps. Whoops, it's actually just /caps. And inside of there, I can see here's my first cap, my test cap 1. So I can grab that slug or identifier and add that to the URL. And that fetches this cap. And then I can say /forms. And inside of there, it's going to give me an array of forms. I can see my test form 1 here. And then what's really nice about our API is we have this ability to kind of traverse from sibling API route, so from a lower API route, to grab information above. So if right now I'm on a form, I can say $include equals cap. And now my cap is going to be included here in a single API call. And then I can say cap.space. And so it's going to now include the cap and the space. And the beauty of this is when you're building up a front end, you might need to grab some metadata from your form or your cap or your space to stitch together a screen. And you can do that in a single API call. Now, let's also fetch the submission itself. So in that case, it's my base URL /app API v1 submissions, and then the ID of the submission that I want to grab. So I'm going to grab this ID for the record that we created, add it to my URL. Whoops, I spelled that wrong. It's submissions. And it just returned now that record so that I can start interacting with it. So again, the whole point here is as you're building some front-end code or you're building a workflow that needs to interact back with the Kinetic platform, this is how we do it from the API. And then on a submission, I can say include my values, or so my field values. And so here I can see my values, favorite color is red, like I chose when I submitted that record. Now, I know that that's a lot to digest. The good news is once we're back in our builder, underneath help, you can click on API reference docs. And then inside of here, all of the different endpoints that I've covered are very well documented here. You can actually test them out. So for instance, I can go in and create a form from the API. I can try it. And I can provide a new cap slug. So test cap 2. And let's post this. And then that would then go and create that test cap 2. So the last concept that I want to cover in today's video is a concept that we call attributes. You can think of attributes like variables that you would tie to specific objects within Kinetic. An object within Kinetic might be a user or a team or a cap or a form. And these attributes can be used as variables that might drive the way that the user experience looks or might drive a workflow. And so the scenario that I'll walk through here is in my end user experience, I'm going to have a listing of all of the different forms that someone can select. And I want to be able to show an icon for each form. So we can create an attribute called icon and apply it to our form. And then I'll show you in the API how we can go and fetch that attribute. And then on the React side, we can go ahead and test, if the icon exists, then show the value as the icon. And so inside of, in the cap context here, I've got to define a form attribute inside of my cap. So I'm going to click on attributes, form, new definition, icon. So I can create that icon attribute definition. And now I can go to any of my forms. So test form 1, choose attributes. And then I've already set this up, but set the icon to font awesome icon. And then again, my front end, when I'm building my React code, I can say, hey, when you fetch my list of forms, return back the attributes. And then if an icon exists, use the icon's value, or that attribute's value, to put a font awesome icon on the screen, for instance. So if I switch over back to the API, I'm going to say app, API, v1, caps, test cap1, forms, and then I can say !include equals attributes. And so I can see here's my forms array. I only have one form. But inside of that, I can see I have attributes, and one of the attributes is called the icon, and then FA truck. And so in the future, what we could do is come into our end user experience, and when I choose a cap on this list of forms, if an icon exists, we can put a little icon next to it. So we'll get into how to actually apply that in the next session. With that, I'm going to sign off, and feel free to continue the orientation videos. We'd love to get involved, so you can always reach out to Kinetic Data as well. Thanks.